The mafia boss froze mid-step when he saw them, bruises wrapped around his maid's wrists like evidence of a crime she was too terrified to report. Wicky Ruiz had been hiding them for months, pulling her sleeves down every morning, stammering excuses about cabinet doors and clumsiness. But Anthony Kline didn't believe in accidents. What she didn't know was that the man who'd hurt her had just made the deadliest mistake of his life, because Anthony had already decided she was under his protection, and nothing in this world would stop him from keeping that promise. Anthony Kline didn't believe in accidents. At 6:34 a.m., he stood in his penthouse kitchen overlooking the Manhattan skyline, scrolling through encrypted messages that would send most people running to federal witness protection. But Anthony wasn't most people. He was a man who'd built an empire in the shadows, who could read a room the way others read newspapers, the slight twitch of a jaw during negotiations, the millisecond of hesitation before someone shook his hand, the way people's breathing changed when they lied. As we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue in the story. So when Wicky Ruiz entered his kitchen carrying his morning espresso on a small silver tray, he noticed immediately that her sleeves were pulled down too far. Not just down, stretched over her knuckles, gripped tight in her fists like she was holding herself together, or hiding something. "Good morning, Mr. Kline," she said quietly, her voice barely rising above the soft hum of the espresso machine. It was always quiet. In the 5.5 months she'd worked here, Anthony had never heard Wicky raise her voice above a polite murmur. She moved through his home like a ghost. Efficient, invisible, careful never to intrude. "Morning, Wicky." He watched her approach the marble island, her movements precise and practiced. She set the cup down with both hands, and that's when it happened. She reached up to adjust the handle, angling it toward him the way he preferred. Her sleeve caught on the edge of the saucer and slipped back, just for a moment, maybe 2 seconds, but it was enough. Dark purple bruises circled her wrist like ugly handprints. Some were fresh, deep purple and angry. Others had faded to that sickly yellow-green color that meant they were days old, maybe a week, finger-shaped, deliberate. His eyes caught them before she yanked her sleeve back down, and he saw her freeze. She knew he'd seen. "Wicky," he said calmly, setting his phone on the counter. "Sit down." "Oh, I should get back to—" "Sit." It wasn't loud. Anthony never needed to be loud. But something in his tone, the same tone that made grown men confess to betrayals before he'd even asked, made her obey. She sank into one of the leather bar stools across from him, looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "What happened to your wrist?" "Nothing, Mr. Kline. I'm just clumsy." She forced out a laugh that sounded like shattering glass. "I hit it on the edge of the cupboard yesterday while I was cleaning upstairs." Anthony leaned against the counter, studying her with the same intensity he used to evaluate business deals worth millions. Wicky was 26, according to her employment file. Petite, with dark hair she always wore in a tight bun, and brown eyes that rarely met anyone's gaze directly. Mrs. Chen, his housekeeper, had recommended her, said she was thorough, quiet, never asked questions, kept her head down. But Mrs. Chen hadn't mentioned the fear, and that's what Anthony saw now. Not embarrassed about being clumsy. Fear, raw and visceral. "Both wrists?" he asked gently, watching how she unconsciously rubbed her other arm through the fabric. Wicky's face went pale. "Ah, yes, I'm..." Very clumsy. Show me. Mr. Kline, really, I'm fine. Wicky. He kept his voice soft but immovable. Show me. Her hands trembled as she slowly pulled back both sleeves. Both wrists bore the same marks, finger-shaped bruises, wrapped completely around like someone had grabbed her and held on. Hard. Recently. Anthony felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. He'd built an empire in the shadows of New York. He'd ordered hits, orchestrated disappearances, made decisions that kept him awake some nights. But he had rules, lines he didn't cross. And one of those lines was absolute. You didn't hurt people who couldn't fight back. Someone had hurt Wicky. Someone had grabbed this woman hard enough to leave marks that told a story of violence, and she was terrified enough to lie about it in his kitchen. Who did this to you? Nobody. I told you, I'm just Wicky. He leaned forward, resting his palms on the cold marble between them. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to understand something first. You work in my home, under my roof. That means you're under my protection. Do you understand? She looked up at him with those frightened doe eyes, and for a moment he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted slightly. He could see her weighing options in her head, calculating risks he couldn't yet name. Then she stood abruptly, yanking her sleeves back down. I really should get back to work. The breakfast dishes. Wicky! But she was already backing toward the door, moving faster with each step. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Kline. I promise I'll be more careful. And then she was gone, practically fleeing from his kitchen, leaving only the faint scent of her lavender soap and the untouched espresso on the counter. Anthony stood alone in the silent kitchen for a long moment, staring at the doorway she'd disappeared through. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person in this building he trusted with his life. Mrs. Chen, my office, now. 3 minutes later, his housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Patricia Chen had worked for the Kline family for 28 years. She was 60, sharp as broken glass, and one of the few people who wasn't afraid to tell Anthony when he was making a mistake. You bellowed? She said dryly, closing the door behind her. Wicky, tell me about her. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted immediately from sass to concern. What happened? She's hurt. Bruises on both wrists, finger marks. She's terrified, and she's lying about it. Jesus! Mrs. Chen sank heavily into the chair Wicky had just abandoned. I didn't know. Anthony, I swear, I didn't know. What do you know about her personal life? Not much. She keeps to herself. Mrs. Chen's brow furrowed, thinking. I know she had a boyfriend, or maybe an ex-boyfriend. She mentioned him once when she first started, said she'd just gotten out of a bad relationship. I needed work desperately. I got the sense she was running from something. Running from someone, Anthony corrected quietly. Mrs. Chen met his eyes, understanding dawning. You think it's the ex? I think someone grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises that tell a story, and she's too scared to report it. He moved to the window, watching the city wake up 20 floors below. Find out where she goes after work. Don't follow her yourself. Have Marco do it. Discreet. I want to know where she lives, who she sees, if anyone's watching her. Anthony, nobody touches my people, Patricia. His voice was ice. Nobody. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. She'd seen this side of Anthony before, the protective, almost paternal fury that surfaced when someone under his care was threatened. For all his darkness, all the blood on his hands, Anthony Kline operated by a code. I'll talk to her, Mrs. Chen offered. "Maybe she'll open up to another woman." "Do that, but carefully. She's already spooked." Anthony turned back to the window. "And Patricia, have security pull all the exterior camera footage, every angle going back 2 weeks. You think someone followed her here?" "I think," Anthony said quietly, his reflection cold in the glass, "that Wicky Ruiz is running from something, and I intend to find out what." After Mrs. Chen left, Anthony stood alone in his office, the morning routine forgotten. Outside his window, Manhattan was coming alive. Taxis honking, pedestrians flooding sidewalks, the city moving forward like nothing was wrong. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the darker currents running beneath the surface. Somewhere in this city, someone had hurt Wicky, had grabbed her, terrified her, made her so afraid she couldn't even ask for help. Anthony picked up his phone again, this time calling his head of security. "Marco, I need you to run a background check. Quietly. Wicky Ruiz, she's employed here as a maid. I want everything. Where she lives, employment history, family, relationships. Any ex-boyfriends or ex-husbands. Police reports, restraining orders, anything that might explain why she's terrified." "How fast do you need it?" Anthony looked at the closed office door, remembering the fear in Wicky's eyes, the way she'd fled from him like he was the threat. "Yesterday." He ended the call and sat back in his leather chair. Outside, the sun was rising over the East River, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Inside Anthony's chest, something darker was rising too. Someone had made a grave mistake. They'd touched what was his to protect. And in Anthony Kline's world, mistakes were always corrected. Marco Delano had been Anthony's head of security for 9 years. He'd tracked down embezzlers, handled territorial disputes, and once identified a federal informant before the man could do real damage. But investigating a frightened maid, that was new territory. By 2:00 p.m., he was knocking on Anthony's office door with a manila folder in hand, his expression grim. "That was fast," Anthony said, gesturing inside. "It wasn't hard." Marco dropped the folder on the mahogany desk. "But you're not going to like it." Anthony didn't open it immediately. Instead, he turned to his computer, pulling up the security footage he'd been reviewing for the past hour. "Watch this first." The timestamp read 4 days earlier, 6:47 p.m. The camera angle showed the service alley behind Anthony's building, the staff entrance Wicky used. For several minutes, nothing. Then a man appeared, pacing, checking his phone. Late 30s, muscular build, dressed in casual clothes that didn't hide the aggression in his posture. At 6:52 p.m., Wicky emerged from the door, her purse clutched to her chest. The pot moved fast. He grabbed her arm, yanked her against the brick wall. Even without audio, the body language told the story. His finger jabbing toward her face, her cowering stance, the way she kept shaking her head. No, no, no. Anthony's jaw tightened as he watched the man's grip on Wicky's arm, the same arm that bore those ugly bruises. The confrontation lasted 3 minutes. Finally, Wicky nodded, defeated, broken. The man released her and walked away without looking back. "Raymond Torres," Marco said, opening the folder to reveal a photograph. 38, ex-boyfriend. They dated for 2 years and broke up 8 months ago. Anthony studied the photo. Clean-cut, square jaw, cold eyes. "What does he do?" "City liaison officer. Works between the NYPD and the mayor's office. Glorified bureaucrat with a badge and connections." Marco's voice hardened. "His uncle is Deputy Commissioner Frank Torres." "Of course he is. Anthony leaned back, fingers steepled. Priors? 2 domestic disturbance calls to their old apartment. Both times she refused to press charges. Marco pulled out another document. Neighbors reported hearing fights. One witness said she saw Wicky with a black eye. But when police showed up, she claimed she'd fallen. Anthony's hands curled into fists beneath the desk. There's more, Marco continued. Raymond has ties to the Castellanos. He's been feeding them information, using his position to tip them off about police raids, helping them avoid scrutiny. That's probably how he's stayed untouchable. Anthony stood, moving to the window. The Castellanos. His rivals had been pushing into his territory for months, and now he knew how. A corrupt liaison officer with family connections and a badge to hide behind. If Anthony moved directly, had Raymond beaten or killed, it would bring scrutiny, federal attention, the kind of heat that could dismantle everything he'd built. But Anthony hadn't built an empire through violence alone. Sometimes, precision beat force. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. She said something to me once, the housekeeper said when he answered. About 3 months ago. I asked if she was okay and she broke down. Said someone was watching her, that she couldn't escape. I tried to help, but she shut down immediately. Said, you don't understand. He has friends everywhere. If I talk, my sister pays. Anthony's blood ran cold. Sister? Elena, 19 years old. I'm a student at NYU. After Marco and Mrs. Chen left, Anthony sat alone in his study as night fell over Manhattan. The city glittered below like scattered diamonds, beautiful and merciless. He'd killed men for lesser offenses than what Raymond Torres had done to Wicky. But death was too quick, too merciful. No, Anthony was going to dismantle Raymond piece by piece, using the very system the man thought protected him. He'd strip away his badge, his connections, his protection. And when Raymond had nothing left, when he was exposed and vulnerable, only then would he understand the mistake he'd made. In the shadows of New York, Anthony Kline was feared as a monster, but monsters knew how to protect their own. Wicky couldn't sleep. She lay in her small studio apartment in Queens, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying the morning over and over. The way Mr. Kline's eyes had locked onto her bruises, the way his voice had dropped when he'd said, "You're under my protection." Protection. The word felt foreign. Raymond had promised protection once, too, back when he was charming, when he brought her flowers and opened doors, before the charm curdled into control, before control turned into violence. 3 nights ago. The memory crashed over her like a wave. Raymond's hand on her arm in that alley, his breath hot against her face. "You think working for some mafia scum protects you?" he'd hissed, backing her against the cold brick wall. "One word from me, and your sister disappears. You know I can do it, Wicky. I know people." She'd tried to pull away, but his grip had tightened, those same fingers that had left the bruises Mr. Kline had seen. Shipment schedules, meeting locations, security weaknesses. "You're going to get me information, or Elena pays the price." "Raymond, please." He'd twisted her wrists until she cried out. "You'll do it, or your baby sister becomes a statistic. Do you understand me?" She nodded. What choice did she have? Now, lying in the dark, Wicky felt trapped between 2 impossible options. Betray the man who'd shown her more kindness in 1 morning than Raymond had in 2 years, or risk Elena's life. Raymond would find her if she ran. He always did. Her only option was compliance. Gather small details. Harmless things. Just enough to keep Raymond satisfied. The next morning, Wicky moved through Anthony's penthouse like a ghost, avoiding his gaze as she dusted the living room. But she couldn't help noticing the changes. Security had doubled. Men in dark suits lingered by every entrance, their eyes sharp and watchful. Anthony himself seemed different, distracted, making hushed phone calls behind closed doors, reviewing documents with an intensity that made the air feel electric. "Wicky, dear," Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, voice low. "Whatever you're afraid of, Mr. Kline can help. He's not like other men in his world. He protects people." Wicky's throat tightened. "You don't understand." "I understand fear when I see it." Mrs. Chen's hand was warm on her shoulder. "And I understand that running from it alone never works." Wicky wanted to believe her, but fear had taught her not to trust anyone. Late afternoon, Wicky was cleaning Anthony's study when her elbow caught a stack of papers on his desk. They scattered across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. She knelt quickly, gathering them, and froze. Surveillance photos. Raymond's face, captured from multiple angles. Outside the building, in his car, at a coffee shop. Her blood turned to ice. He knows. You recognize him. Wicky spun around. Anthony stood in the doorway, watching her with those unreadable eyes. I can explain." "Then explain." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The dam broke. Words tumbled out in a desperate flood. Raymond. The threats. Elena. The demands for information. "I haven't told him anything. I swear. I didn't know what else to do." Anthony raised a hand, and she fell silent, trembling. "How long has he been hurting you?" The gentleness in his voice undid her completely. Wicky collapsed into the nearest chair and told him everything. The abuse that had started with harsh words and escalated to bruises. Raymond's connections that made escape impossible. The promise that if she ran, if she talked, Elena would pay. When she finished, Anthony was silent for a long moment. Then he moved closer, crouching until they were eye level. "You should have told me sooner." "I was scared." "I know." His voice softened in a way she hadn't thought possible. "But you're not alone anymore. Do you understand that?" She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. "No one hurts what's mine to protect," Anthony continued, his voice steady and absolute. "Raymond Torres made a mistake when he touched you, and I'm going to make sure he never makes another one." There was no cruelty in his eyes, no violence, just certainty, the kind that came from a man who'd never broken a promise. For the first time in months, Wicky felt something fragile bloom in her chest. Hope. The war room sat 2 levels beneath Anthony's penthouse, a soundproof office with encrypted servers and no windows. Only his inner circle knew it existed. Tonight, 3 men sat around the steel table. Marco Delano, head of security. Vincent Cole, his attorney and fixer. James Park, tech specialist and former NSA contractor who'd left government work after discovering he preferred higher pay and fewer ethics committees. Anthony stood at the head of the table. Raymond's file spread before them. "We're not killing Raymond Torres," he said flatly. "We're destroying him." Vincent leaned back, fingers steepled. "His uncle's the deputy commissioner. Internal affairs won't touch him." "Then we go outside." Anthony's voice was cold calculation. Federal authorities have been building a corruption case against NYPD officers with organized crime ties. We're going to make Raymond their star defendant. James was already typing. Give me 20 minutes. It took him 15. Bank accounts, James said, pulling up documents on the wall-mounted screen. Shell company deposits. 5 to 15,000 monthly, dating back 18 months. More screens appeared. Text messages between Raymond and known Castellano associates discussing protection fees, emails where he provided police raid schedules. Anthony studied the evidence with satisfaction. Package it. Everything. Vincent pulled out his laptop. I know an FBI agent, Sarah Ortega, Corruption Task Force. She's clean, ambitious, and she hates dirty cops. His fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting an encrypted email. We send this through untraceable servers. By morning, Raymond Torres becomes her white whale. Anthony watched Vincent attach the files, surveillance footage, financial records, communication logs. Every damning piece of Raymond's corruption, gift-wrapped for federal prosecution. Vincent's finger hovered over send. Once this goes out, there's no taking it back. Send it. The button clicked. Let the dominoes fall, Vincent murmured. The next morning, Raymond's patience snapped. Anthony's phone buzzed. A text from his security team stationed outside Wicky's apartment building. Subject attempted entry. Turned away. Agitated. Minutes later, Wicky appeared in his office, phone trembling in her hand. He called, she whispered. He said I have 48 hours to get him something useful. Or, Elena, breathe. Anthony's voice was steady. Let him think he's winning. In 2 days, Raymond Torres won't be able to threaten anyone. But even as he said it, he saw the fear in her eyes, the what-ifs that kept her awake at night. That evening, Anthony reviewed security access logs, routine procedures he'd learned never to skip. Something caught his eye. Marco had accessed shipment route files, the same files Raymond had specifically demanded through Wicky. Anthony's blood turned cold. He pulled up more logs. Storage facility locations. Security shift schedules. Marco had been in the system repeatedly over the past 3 weeks. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised him. In his world, loyalty was currency, easily traded. But it stung nonetheless. He called Vincent. We have an internal problem. Handle it quietly. Then he set a trap. Anthony fed Marco false information about a shipment arriving at Pier 9 Thursday night. High-value pharmaceuticals. Minimal security. Within 2 hours, Raymond texted Wicky. Pier 9, Thursday. What time? Confirmation. Anthony found Marco in the parking garage at midnight, checking his car like he did every night. Going somewhere? Marco froze. Boss, just heading home. Pier 9, Anthony said quietly. There is no shipment, Marco. Understanding dawned in Marco's eyes, followed quickly by fear. Anthony, listen. Raymond offered me immunity. A clean exit from all this. I was going to leave anyway. You chose the wrong side. Please, Anthony's face was stone. You've been with me 9 years. I trusted you with my life, and you sold me out for a corrupt cop's empty promises. I'm sorry. So am I. What happened next was swift and silent, the way these things always were in Anthony's world. Marco Delano had made his choice. Now, he paid the price. No one betrayed Anthony Kline twice. Anthony returned to his study an hour later, shoulders heavy with the weight of leadership. He poured himself whiskey, staring at the city lights below. The cost of protection was always high. Tonight, it had cost him a man he'd once called friend. But when he thought of Wicky's bruised wrists, her terrified eyes, the way she'd finally trusted him enough to tell the truth, his resolve hardened to steel. The game was in motion. Raymond Torres didn't know it yet, but he was already a checkmate. And Anthony Kline always played to win. FBI Field Office, Manhattan. 6:42 a.m. Agent Sarah Ortega stared at her computer screen, reading the anonymous email for the third time in 48 hours. The evidence was surgical: bank records, surveillance footage, encrypted communications. Raymond Torres, city liaison officer, wasn't just dirty, he was drowning in corruption. She grabbed the file and headed to her supervisor's office. "We need to move now," she said, dropping the folder on his desk, "before he's tipped off." Her supervisor scanned the documents, eyebrows climbing. "Where did this come from? Does it matter?" "It's all verifiable." Sarah leaned forward. "Torres has been feeding intel to the Castellano crime family for 18 months. If we wait, he disappears. Get your warrant." Within hours, federal surveillance blanketed Raymond's life. They traced shell company payments, confirmed, down to the cent. Wiretaps captured him discussing protection arrangements with known Castellano associates. Every piece of anonymous evidence checked out. The warrant was signed by noon. Raymond felt the walls closing in. His NYPD contacts had stopped answering calls. Text messages went unreturned. Even his uncle, Deputy Commissioner Frank Torres, his shield against consequences, had gone radio silent. Something was wrong. Standing in his apartment, Raymond made a decision. Wicky had failed him. 48 hours had passed, and she'd delivered nothing. Time to remind her what happened to people who disappointed him. Anthony's phone buzzed. A text from his source inside the FBI. "Warrant issued. Moving tonight." Perfect timing. He called his security chief, Marco's replacement, a man named Victor who understood loyalty. "Raymond's going to make a move on Wicky. I want her shadowed, but stay invisible. When he shows up, I want him caught in the act. Then call the feds. And if he tries to hurt her, he won't get the chance." 8:47 p.m. Raymond stormed into Wicky's apartment building, flashing his badge at the doorman. "Official business." He took the stairs 2 at a time, rage propelling him forward. At her door, he pounded with his fist. "Open up, Wicky! We need to talk." Inside, Wicky's hands shook as she dialed Anthony's number. "He's here," she whispered. "I know. Stall him. Help is coming." She approached the door, chain lock engaged, and opened a crack. Raymond's face appeared, disheveled, manic, desperate. "You've been avoiding me. What did you tell Kline?" "Nothing. I swear." Raymond slammed his shoulder against the door. The chain snapped. He burst inside, grabbing her arm, the same bruised wrists, and dragged her backwards. "You think you're safe because you work for some mobster?" His voice was venomous. "I'll show you what happens to people who cross me." Before his hand could rise, the door exploded inward. Anthony's men flooded the apartment, weapons drawn. Raymond spun around, reaching for his gun, and froze. Federal agents poured in behind them, badges high, firearms trained. Agent Sarah Ortega stepped forward, her voice iron. "Raymond Torres, you're under arrest for bribery, corruption, and conspiracy to commit racketeering." Raymond's face was drained of color. You set me up. You can't do this. My uncle..." "Your uncle is under investigation too. He resigned an hour ago." Ortega nodded to her team. He's done. As handcuffs clicked around Raymond's wrists, he locked eyes with Wicky, rage and disbelief warring in his expression. You'll pay for this. Anthony stepped forward, his voice quiet and lethal. No, she won't. But you will. Raymond was led away, shouting threats that echoed down the hallway. Wicky collapsed into a chair, her entire body shaking. Anthony dismissed his men with a gesture, waited until the agents finished their work, then knelt beside her. It's over. He can't hurt you anymore. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Why did you do this? I'm nobody. Anthony's response was quiet, absolute. You work for me. That makes you somebody. By morning, Raymond's arrest was everywhere. Headlines screamed across every news outlet. City liaison officer arrested in corruption scandal. His connections to the Castellanos were exposed. Deputy Commissioner Torres's resignation, the whole ugly web unraveled for the city to see. In her small Queens apartment, Wicky slept without nightmares for the first time in years. But one question lingered in her mind as consciousness faded. Why would a mafia boss risk everything to save a maid? 3 days after Raymond's arrest, Anthony's penthouse returned to its careful rhythm. Coffee brewed at dawn, phones rang with business, the city hummed 20 floors below. But something had shifted. Wicky moved through her duties differently now, shoulders back, eyes forward. The fear that had shadowed her movements was fading, replaced by something else. Curiosity. She watched Anthony when she thought he wasn't looking, trying to understand the man who'd dismantled her nightmare without asking for anything in return. The meeting happened in a neutral restaurant in Midtown, closed to the public, swept for bugs. Don Castellano sat across from Anthony, flanked by his sons. The old man's face was carved granite, eyes hard despite his 72 years. You crossed a line, Kline. Anthony sipped his espresso, unhurried. I cleaned up your mess. Raymond was sloppy, drew federal attention to operations that should have stayed buried. You should be thanking me. Our asset, your liability. Anthony's voice sharpened. How long before the feds traced him back to you? I gave you plausible deniability. You're welcome. The silence stretched taut. Finally, Don Castellano nodded. A fractional concession. We'll call it even. This time. The truce was fragile, held together by logic rather than trust. Anthony knew it wouldn't last. Back at the penthouse, Vincent poured himself scotch. Protecting the girl has cost you. The other families are calling it weakness. Anthony stared out at the Manhattan skyline. Let them. Anthony, I don't regret it. His voice was final. Vincent studied his oldest friend, then raised his glass. Then, neither do I. Late that night, Anthony was reviewing contracts when soft footsteps approached his study. Wicky stood in the doorway, holding a handwritten letter. I don't know how to thank you. Anthony barely glanced up. You don't need to. But you risked everything. Your business, your reputation. I did what was necessary. His tone was clipped, dismissive, the armor he wore against sentiment. Wicky stepped closer, her voice small. I'm just a maid. Anthony's pen stilled. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then he set it down and finally looked at her. When I was 16, my mother worked as a housekeeper for a family in Brooklyn. His voice carried weight that hadn't been there before. One of the sons hurt her, beat her. She was too scared to tell my father, too afraid of losing the income we needed. Wicky's breath caught. By the time I found out, the damage was done. She never recovered. Not really. Died when I was 19. His eyes met hers, raw with old pain. I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone under my protection again. So no, Wicky, you're not just anything. The silence between them felt sacred somehow. Wicky nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears, and quietly left. But something had changed. The distance between them had collapsed into understanding. The next afternoon, Wicky's sister Elena arrived at the penthouse, 19, bright-eyed, nervous. Mrs. Chen escorted her to Anthony's study. "Mr. Kline?" Her voice was soft. "I'm Elena, Wicky's sister. I just wanted to say thank you for keeping her safe." Anthony found himself awkward in the face of her earnestness. He nodded. "She's brave. You should be proud." Elena smiled, and it transformed her face. "I am, and I think you are too. Brave, I mean." After she left, Anthony sat alone with that word. Brave. Not powerful, not feared. Brave. In a world built on violence, what did it mean to be good? That night, his phone buzzed. A text from an old contact, someone who owed him favors and paid in information. "The Castellanos are planning something. Watch your back." Anthony's jaw tightened. He called Victor immediately. "Double security on the penthouse, and I want a detail on Wicky's apartment building, 24/7. The game wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase. 2 weeks later, life found its rhythm. Wicky moved through Anthony's penthouse with something that almost resembled peace. She smiled occasionally. Small, fragile things, but real. Anthony returned to his routines, though his eyes lingered on exits and his phone stayed closer than before. Watchful. Always watchful. The call came at 11:37 p.m. "Boss, we've got a problem. The shipment at Pier 12. It's been hit." Anthony was already moving, grabbing his jacket. "Casualties?" "None. But they knew exactly when and where." This was targeted. When Anthony's backup team arrived at the docks, the message was clear. Crates opened. Contents photographed, but not stolen. A warning, not a robbery. The Castellanos. Anthony spent the night reviewing footage tracing the leak. Then he found it. A security camera from a coffee shop 2 blocks from the federal courthouse. Raymond Torres, out on bail, sitting across from known Castellano enforcers. Anthony's blood ran cold. Raymond had nothing left to lose. No badge, no career, no protection. Just rage and the need for revenge. He called Victor immediately. "Raymond's gone scorched earth. Double the detail on Wicky. Now." Raymond sat in his empty apartment, surrounded by newspapers screaming his disgrace. His uncle wouldn't return calls. His pension was gone. His life destroyed. All because of her. Because of Kline. He made one final call to the Castellanos. "I'll give you Kline, but I want the girl first." They came at 2:14 a.m. Raymond and 2 Castellano thugs picked Wicky's apartment lock with practiced efficiency. The door swung open silently, and Anthony's security team was already inside. "Wrong apartment," Victor said, weapon trained. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the night. Furniture splintered. One thug went down immediately. The second lunged toward Wicky, who'd been sleeping in the bedroom. She stumbled back, trapped against the kitchen counter. Her hand found something heavy, a wooden mallet she'd brought home from the penthouse weeks ago, meaning to return it. When the thug charged, Wicky swung with everything she had. The mallet connected with his shoulder, a solid crack that sent pain shooting up her arms. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it bought precious seconds. Victor's team moved in, taking the thug down. Raymond bolted for the fire escape. Anthony's car screeched to a halt in the alley just as Raymond hit the ground. The two men faced each other in the narrow space, Manhattan's lights casting long shadows. Raymond pulled a gun, hands shaking. "This is all your fault, Kline. You ruined me." Anthony stood still, unarmed, unflinching. "No, you ruined yourself. I had everything. You had nothing but borrowed power and a badge that let you hurt people weaker than you." Anthony's voice was ice. "I didn't destroy you, Raymond. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of being exactly who you are." Police sirens wailed closer, growing louder. Raymond's hand trembled. "I should kill you right now." Anthony took a step forward. "Then do it, but it won't change anything. You'll still be a coward who beat a woman because you couldn't control your own pathetic life." The words cut deeper than bullets. Before Raymond could respond, NYPD units flooded the alley, weapons drawn. He was surrounded, trapped. Agent Ortega emerged from an unmarked car, her expression granite. "Bail revoked. Attempted kidnapping. Assault with a deadly weapon. Conspiracy. You're going away for a long time, Torres." As officers dragged Raymond toward a patrol car, he screamed threats up at Wicky's window, where she stood watching, finally safe. Anthony found Wicky still clutching the wooden mallet, her hands white-knuckled around the handle. He gently pried it from her grip. "It's over, for real this time." She nodded, but couldn't speak. Later, when the police and forensic teams finally left, she broke. Years of fear, of survival, of pretending she was fine. It all collapsed in a wave of tears. Anthony stood awkwardly, then patted her shoulder with the uncertainty of a man unused to comfort. "You're safe, I promise." Wicky grabbed his hand, held it tight. "I believe you." 1 month later, the world had rearranged itself. Raymond Torres was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Corruption, assault, conspiracy. No bail, no appeals that would matter. The Castellanos, rattled by federal scrutiny and the loss of their NYPD pipeline, had retreated from Anthony's territory like wolves slinking back into the forest. Life in Anthony Kline's world returned to its careful equilibrium, but some things had changed permanently. Wicky arrived at the penthouse on a crisp October morning, and Mrs. Chen paused mid-step, studying her. "What?" Wicky asked, self-conscious. "You look like yourself again." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I wasn't sure I'd ever see it." It was true. Wicky moved differently now. Shoulders back, chin lifted, no longer flinching at sudden sounds or shadows. The bruises had faded weeks ago, replaced by something stronger. Certainty. The knowledge that she could survive anything. "Wicky, my study, please." Her stomach tightened as she followed Anthony's voice. Old fear tried to surface, but she pushed it down. He's not Raymond. He's never been Raymond. Anthony gestured to a chair. "I've been thinking about your situation." Her heart dropped. "If you want me to leave?" "No." He slid an envelope across the desk. "This is for your sister's tuition. Full ride through NYU. Everything is covered." Wicky stared at it like it might explode. "I can't accept this." "You can. And you will." His tone left no room for argument. "I'm also opening a legitimate hospitality business, property management, residential leasing. I need someone detail-oriented, trustworthy, someone who understands people at their worst." He met her eyes. "I want you to manage it." "Anthony, Mr. Kline, I don't have experience." "You have something better. You survived. That takes more skill than any business degree." He leaned back. This isn't charity, Wicky. It's an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Her eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Anthony's response was simple, devastating. Because you deserve better than scrubbing floors for a mobster. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with understanding. I won't let you down, Wicky said finally, her voice steady. Anthony nodded, then added quietly, You never did. That evening, Anthony stood alone in his study, whiskey in hand, watching the city lights flicker below. Vincent entered without knocking, a privilege of 30 years' friendship. The Castellanos signed the peace treaty. You've stabilized things. For now, Vincent studied him over his own glass. You've changed since all this started. The men have noticed. Changed how? You're softer, more human. Anthony smirked. Don't let it get around. But they both knew it was true. Early morning, the penthouse kitchen bathed in amber light. Wicky prepared coffee, not as a maid this time, but as an employee with dignity, purpose, a future. Anthony entered in his tan jacket, hair slightly disheveled from sleep, looking more human than crime lord. They exchanged a brief, comfortable smile. No words needed. She handed him his espresso. He nodded his thanks. As Wicky headed toward the door to start her new role, she paused. Mr. Kline? He looked up. Thank you. For everything. Anthony's expression softened, barely perceptible, but real. Be safe. Wicky. She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. I will. Because of you. After she left, Anthony returned to the window. Manhattan was waking up, the sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Mrs. Chen appeared beside him, quiet as always. You did a good thing. Anthony didn't respond immediately, just watched the light spill across the marble counters where Wicky's Bruises had once told a silent story. Maybe, he said finally. Or maybe I just corrected a mistake. Whose mistake? The world's. For making her think she deserved to be hurt. Anthony Kline ruled his empire with fear, cunning, and ruthless precision. But on that morning, as golden light transformed his kitchen into something almost holy, he understood something new. True power wasn't found in violence or intimidation. It lived in the choice to protect the powerless, to stand between the victim and the predator, to use strength not for conquest, but for mercy. The mafia world would never understand. But Wicky did, and for a man who lived in the shadows, that was enough. In the end, what shocked everyone around Anthony Kline wasn't that he saved a maid from her abuser. It was that he proved even monsters could have a heart, if they chose to use it. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comment below. If you love this story of survival, protection, and unexpected love, subscribe to our channel for more dark romance tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story.